When Alina and I moved into Pine Bluff Estates, we expected tranquility, winding trails, manicured lawns, and the quiet kind of life that doesn't make headlines. We'd just left DC after a whirlwind of late nights and high-stakes pressure. I was ready for peace, Alina. She was coming off something far more intense, though most of the neighborhood would never know just how much. The first week felt like a dream. Morning coffee on the porch, birdsong instead of sirens. People waved, smiled, welcomed us with small talk and bundt cakes. Then we met her, Karen Delacroix, HOA president, gatekeeper, tyrant. She didn't knock on our door. She ambushed us. It was a sunny Thursday. I was unloading groceries. Alina was inside, organizing the kitchen. I heard the click-click of heels on concrete, followed by the shrill snap of a clipboard. When I turned, there she was, 50-something, bleached bob, pastel sweater wrapped around her shoulders like a noose, and a frozen smile that didn't reach her eyes. "New neighbors," she said, eyes scanning me, then drifting past the front door like she was trying to x-ray the inside of our home. "You must be ... the renters." I blinked. "No, we bought the house." "Oh," she said, clearly disappointed. "You're aware of our community standards, I assume. Pine Bluff takes pride in maintaining a cohesive image." She handed me a printed rulebook thicker than some legal codes. I flipped it open. Page 1 had a quote, "Uniformity is unity. Red flag number 1. Before I could respond, Alina stepped out, drying her hands with a dish towel. Karen's eyes narrowed immediately. "And you are my wife," I said. Karen's smile thinned. "Well, I do hope you'll both make an effort to fit in. We've had issues with certain residents ignoring guidelines. That won't be a problem, will it?" Alina said nothing, just gave a tight nod. Karen didn't know it yet, but she'd just stepped on a landmine. From that moment, the petty warfare began. First came a notice about our mailbox. Apparently it was too urban. Then our porch light was non-standard warm white. We got a warning about leaving our garbage bin at the curb 30 minutes past collection time. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so calculated. Alina brushed it off. Let her exhaust herself. Bullies always do. But Karen wasn't just a busybody with too much time. She was methodical. She had her little army, nothing better to do than police sidewalk cracks and lawn heights, and she relished her power like a queen ruling over a kingdom of concrete and mulch. 3 weeks in, Alina returned from a jog and found an envelope taped to our door. Inside was a formal complaint. Violation 14.23. Unauthorized use of the private service gate, apparently. Karen had seen Alina enter through the maintenance path near the woods, a gate she'd used only once when her key fob glitched. Karen interpreted this as suspicious behavior indicating possible trespass. The next day, Karen brought to board members and stood on our porch like a tribunal. "After reviewing footage, we're questioning whether your wife is officially registered as a resident," Karen said, flipping through papers. "Failure to comply with HOA documentation can be grounds for removal." Alina stepped forward, arms crossed, calm but eyes cold. "You're asking to verify ownership of a home I co-purchased." Karen didn't blink. "Rules are rules. If you're not listed, she's on the deed," I cut in. "Equal owner. And you don't have any right to demand personal documents without legal cause." Karen smiled condescendingly. "We're simply enforcing protocol." Alina tilted her head. "Then maybe you should double-check your authority before enforcing anything unlawful." Karen's facade cracked. "Just a hairline fracture, but I saw it." She wasn't used to pushback, especially not from someone who stared her down with the calm of a bomb technician. As Karen turned to leave, she gave us one last warning. "We take community standards seriously. Non-compliance has consequences." Alina closed the door, then turned to me with a smirk. "She thinks she's going to scare us out of our own home," she said. "Let her try." That was the moment the game changed. Karen had picked the wrong target, and she had no idea that behind the smile, behind the calm demeanor, my wife wasn't just some new resident, she was the storm. The notice came the following Monday, bold red lettering, taped dead center on our front door for maximum visibility. HOA enforcement action. Notice of eviction rule. 22.1. Unauthorized occupant. Peeled it off and read the absurd text twice. Karen had officially declared war. According to the board, Alina was not listed as a verified resident and had failed to provide requested documents. We were instructed to have her vacate the premises within 72 hours or face fines and legal action. At the bottom was Karen's pristine signature in looping cursive, accompanied by a smug little embossed HOA seal. Alina read it silently, then folded the notice with surgical precision and set it on the counter. "She really thinks she can force me out." I nodded. "She thinks you're hiding something, and that gives her the upper hand." Alina didn't flinch. "She has no idea who she's poking." That night, she disappeared into her home office and emerged 3 hours later with a closed laptop and a knowing smile. "I'm going to give her exactly what she wants," she said. Tomorrow morning, at precisely 10 a.m., Karen returned, this time flanked by a private security guard from Pine Bluff's neighborhood enforcement team. He was in his 20s, overcompensating with a tight black polo and a radio clipped to his belt like he was waiting for a terrorist threat to break out at the mailbox kiosk. Karen didn't even greet us. She raised her chin and launched into her declaration. after multiple documented violations and refusal to cooperate. This association is exercising its right to enforce occupancy compliance. You, ma'am, are in direct violation of Article 22. I stood beside Alina on the porch. Sunlight glinted off the glass in her aviators as she said nothing. Not a blink. Not a twitch. Karen pushed on, emboldened by the silence. We've requested identification. We've been patient. If you do not leave within the hour, Officer Coleman here will begin removal procedures. The security guard looked uncertain, but shifted his weight like he was ready to pretend he had jurisdiction. That's when Alina calmly reached into her leather jacket and pulled out a black bifold wallet. She flipped it open, letting the contents gleam under the morning sun. Gold badge, blue seal, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence was absolute. Karen blinked. What is this? Alina stepped forward just enough to command the moment. Assistant Director Alina Navarro, FBI Field Oversight Division. And unless you're prepared to explain, in writing, how this so-called board attempted to forcibly remove a federal officer from her legally purchased home, I suggest you walk away. Now Karen's mouth opened, then closed. The guard took a literal step back. You never disclosed that, Karen stammered. Because I didn't need to, Alina replied. But now that you've officially crossed into coercion and unlawful threat of removal, I'm making this official. This is no longer an HOA matter. This is a federal one. Karen looked pale. Her knuckles turned white around the clipboard. I didn't mean anything illegal. I was just following procedure. Your procedure, Alina interrupted, has no legal standing. And your notice of eviction. That's a civil rights violation. Plain and simple. You just didn't know it until now. I could feel the temperature of the entire neighborhood shift. Blinds moved behind windows, doors cracked open. Residents who'd previously turned their heads now peeked out, witnessing the moment the self-crowned queen of Pine Bluff was brought to heel. Karen tried to muster her pride, smoothing her blouse with shaking fingers. Well, I'll have to speak to legal. You do that, Alina said, turning on her heel. And make sure they're licensed in this state, because I'll be speaking to mine at the Department of Justice. We closed the door and locked it behind us. The silence hung heavy for a moment, then shattered when I let out a stunned laugh. You just nuked her entire empire with 2 sentences, Alina smirked. No, that was just the warning shot. She turned, walked back into her office, and this time left the door open just wide enough for me to see her badge resting on the desk beside, a thick folder labeled Pine Bluff Estates Investigative Dossier. Karen had wanted a fight. She was about to get a war. By Tuesday morning, Pine Bluff Estates wasn't a peaceful neighborhood, it was a simmering powder keg. The fallout from Elena's badge reveal spread like wildfire. The HOA group chat, once buzzing with gardening tips and petty complaints about leaf blowers, had turned into a battleground of suspicion, fear, and frantic backpedaling. Karen went conspicuously silent. No emails, no compliance alerts, no passive-aggressive newsletters on letterhead. Her clipboard didn't leave her home, and her little army of rule enforcers seemed to vanish with her. But Alina, she was just getting started. I'm not here to flex, she told me over coffee. I'm here to expose. She had already filed a complaint with the State Housing Commission. The Civil Rights Division of the DOJ had received her preliminary report, but that was just the surface. Beneath it, Alina was building a case layer by layer, methodical, relentless, precise. She started interviewing neighbors. At first, they were hesitant, scared. Even Karen's control had been so absolute that people whispered their frustrations like secrets, afraid even the mailbox might be listening. But once word got out that the woman Karen tried to evict was an FBI director, that she was investigating the HOA for misconduct, a dam broke. Mrs. Jensen, from 2 doors down, confessed she'd been fined $500 for having culturally inappropriate lawn decor, a pair of Mexican ceramic sunflowers. A veteran across the street, Mr. Dalton, said Karen had blocked his request for a disability access ramp, citing neighborhood aesthetics. A single mother named Latoya had endured 3 warning letters in 1 week, one for leaving her stroller on the porch, another for chalk drawings on the driveway, and the last for playing music past 7 p.m. Every story carried the same thread: arbitrary enforcement, targeted harassment, and a board ruled by fear. Alina documented it all. By the end of the week she had dozens of statements. She mapped out a timeline of Karen's presidency, tracked board meeting minutes, bank account inconsistencies, and false legal threats. But the most damning piece, the emails. Alina had filed a discovery request under state civil code, demanding internal HOA correspondences. It took a subpoena and some pressure, but a whistleblower on the board, a nervous man named Dennis Finley, handed over a USB drive. What Alina found made my skin crawl. Emails between Karen and her vice president described residents using coded language to urban potential trouble, outsider energy. Karen had used her position to single out anyone who didn't fit her unspoken mold, especially people of color, young professionals, and anyone she couldn't intimidate. Worse, she'd levied illegal fines, misused community funds, and even threatened board members who questioned her authority with fabricated conduct violations. Alina leaned back in her chair after reading the last one. This isn't just abuse of power, she said. This is systemic discrimination. and it's actionable. That night, she sent her full report to the DOJ's Housing Discrimination Task Force. It was no longer an internal squabble. It was a federal investigation. Still, Karen didn't fold. Instead, she tried to strike back. A glossy envelope arrived in our mailbox, and inside, a cease and desist letter accusing Alina of harassment, unauthorized investigation, and disruption of community harmony. It was signed by a so-called legal advisor named Jeffrey R. Caldwell. ESQ. Alina raised an eyebrow as she read it. Caldwell, she muttered, typing rapidly. 10 seconds later, she smirked. Disbarred in 2 states. Not licensed in ours. Nice try. She didn't reply with words. She replied with a formal letter to the state attorney general requesting an inquiry into fraudulent legal representation. Karen was running out of options, and everyone could feel it. The whispers turned to questions, then meetings, then an impromptu vote. By Friday, half the board had resigned. The community was demanding Karen step down, but she wouldn't go quietly. She held a last-ditch emergency meeting in the clubhouse, hoping to save face. Alina and I attended, standing quietly at the back as Karen tried to spin the story. She claimed she was the victim, that she had only tried to preserve the integrity of Pine Bluff. Then Alina stepped forward. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She simply handed the printed report to every resident in the room. Read it, she said. Then decide who's preserving this community and who's poisoning it. Number 1 defended Karen. By the time we walked out, the vote was unanimous. Karen Delacroix was removed as HOA president, but justice wasn't just about her losing power. It was what came next that would truly bring her empire crashing down. 3 weeks after Karen's fall from grace, the neighborhood looked different, less like a carefully curated magazine spread and more like a place where people actually lived. Kids played on sidewalks again, porch lights stayed on past sunset, and, for the first time in months, people smiled without glancing over their shoulders. But while Pine Bluff healed, the real storm was only just beginning for Karen. Alina didn't stop with a board vote. She had filed her report with not 1 but 3 government bodies: the Department of Justice, the State Housing Commission, and the County Attorney's Office. Each agency launched its own inquiry, and each found something worse than the last. The DOJ confirmed multiple violations of the Fair Housing Act, citing a clear pattern of discriminatory enforcement and abuse of authority. The state discovered that HOA funds had been funneled into unauthorized accounts, including one tied to a private landscaping firm owned unsurprisingly by Karen's cousin. The county filed charges of fraudulent misrepresentation, and a formal audit of HOA finances began. And then came the part Karen had never seen coming. The press. Alina had remained quiet, never giving interviews, never boasting. But one anonymous tip later, a local investigative journalist aired a special Behind the Gates: Tyranny in Pine Bluff Estates. Karen's face, once the embodiment of pristine suburban order, was now the poster child of abuse and corruption. Footage was damning. Clips of eviction letters, fine notices, and interviews with victims: Mr. Dalton, LaToya, even little Emma Jensen holding her sunflowers. The story gained traction statewide. Karen's social media went dark. Her car disappeared from the driveway. Rumors swirled: bank accounts frozen, a pending arrest warrant, lawsuits stacking like bricks. But Alina didn't gloat. She just watched it unfold, arms crossed, silent. She built her power on fear. She told me one evening, once that's gone, there's nothing left but shame. The final blow came in a brown envelope, slid under our door by the interim board president Ines, the once timid whistleblower who now carried himself like someone with a spine. Alina, he said, smiling nervously, you'll want to see this. Inside was a letter from the State Oversight Committee. Pine Bluff Estates HOA is officially placed under full external review. Translation: Karen's empire was no longer self-governing. Every rule, every dollar, every decision would be scrutinized by the state for the next 2 years. That weekend, the neighborhood threw its first real block party. Not a mandated spring social, but a genuine gathering. Grills smoked, kids raced bikes, music spilled from speakers that didn't stop at 7 p.m. No one worried about citations or clipboards. Alina didn't want a spotlight, but she got one anyway. As the sun dipped low, Dennis raised a toast to Director Navarro for giving us our neighborhood back. She smiled, nodded once, and slipped away from the crowd shortly after. Later that night, as we sat on our porch bare feet up, drinks in hand, I asked her the question that had been sitting on my chest for weeks. Why didn't you just shut her down on day one? Flash the badge, end it. She looked out over the neighborhood, now alive, real, human, because that would have just stopped her from bothering us, she said. But this wasn't just about us. She hurt everyone. I needed to show her and this community what accountability really looks like. I was quiet for a while, letting that settle. And do you think she's learned? Alina exhaled. Karen didn't need to learn. She needed to lose. There's a difference. In the weeks that followed, Karen officially resigned from the HOA, citing stress and misrepresentation. Her house went up for sale. A moving truck appeared at dawn and was gone by dusk. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. No one noticed until the silence became permanent. Pine Bluff had its piece again, not the fake, polished kind, enforced by threat, but something deeper, earned, defended. And Elena, she returned to work in D.C., not long after her temporary reassignment complete, but her legacy lingered here in this small corner of suburbia, where one tyrant fell and an entire neighborhood stood a little taller. Justice, it turned out, wasn't loud, it was precise, patient, and it left no clipboard unturned.